Cinema isn't always about instant success or record breaking weekends. Sometimes a movie must fail first, to be rediscovered, rewatched, and finally reborn. British cinema has always had a strange relationship with failure. It's poetic, melancholic, even darkly funny. Some of its most brilliant works were ignored, misunderstood, or ridiculed when they first appeared, only to later become sacred texts for filmmakers and fans alike. This is the story of those forgotten flames, films that flickered out at the box office but refused to die. Their art outlasted their earnings. Their vision conquered time. These are 10 British box office bombs that became timeless classics. 1. The Wicker Man, 1973. When The Wicker Man first premiered, it wasn't celebrated. It was buried. Studio executives slashed it. Critics shrugged and audiences stayed away. Director Robin Hardy's strange folk horror starring Edward Woodward and Christopher Lee was too odd for the mainstream and too spiritual for the horror crowd. Part musical, part pagan mystery, part detective story, it confused everyone. The original negative was even lost in a studio vault. Christopher Lee later called it the best film I ever made, and yet at release it barely earned enough to cover its advertising. But time had a plan. In the 1980s, late-night TV and cult screenings revived it. Audiences began to understand its eerie genius, a battle of faith and freedom, sunlight and sacrifice. Now, The Wicker Man is considered one of Britain's greatest horror films, a masterpiece born from ashes. A film once mocked as a failure now stands tall as the foundation of modern folk horror. 2. Withnail and I, 1987. Two unemployed actors, one disastrous holiday, and enough alcohol to drown a small nation. Withnail and I was released quietly in 1987, a black comedy by Bruce Robinson about artistic despair in 1960s London. It bombed. Critics admired it, but the public didn't care. Its slow pacing and bleak humor were too strange for the multiplex age. But for a generation of struggling artists, it became their anthem. Raw, hilarious, painfully honest. Richard E. Grant's performance as Withnail, a drunk, delusional dreamer, became legendary. Every line of dialogue turned into a quote whispered across student dorms and dingy pubs. "We've gone on holiday by mistake." Its failure gave it freedom. It never had to please anyone again, and in that rebellion it found immortality. Today it's one of Britain's most beloved cult classics, a tragicomic portrait of wasted talent that somehow feels timeless, because it's still happening. 3. A Matter of Life and Death, 1946. When Powell and Pressburger released A Matter of Life and Death in 1946, the world wasn't ready. Post-war Britain wanted realism, gritty survival, not celestial fantasy. But the filmmakers gave them a technicolor dream, a story where a pilot cheats death and the afterlife looks like a monochrome courtroom in the clouds. It was visually stunning, narratively daring, and spiritually profound. And yet, audiences were confused. Its tone shifted from romance to philosophy to surrealism. It wasn't a hit. Decades later, critics finally caught up. Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, and countless directors cite it as a masterpiece of imagination. Its once mocked visuals now feel visionary. Its dialogue, once sentimental, now feels eternal. "We are star stuff," whispers the film, long before science said the same. A box office disappointment in 1946. A cinematic scripture today. 4. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. In the mid-70s, British cinema got an alien. Director Nicholas Roeg cast David Bowie, at the height of his otherworldly fame, as an extraterrestrial who comes to Earth seeking water for his dying planet. What he found instead was corruption, addiction, and loneliness. It wasn't the sci-fi audiences expected. No laser battles, no hero's journey. Just a hypnotic, fragmented meditation on fame, greed, and human decay. Critics were baffled and the box office flatlined, but over time its meaning grew clearer. It wasn't just about an alien, it was about us. Bowie's fragile beauty, Roeg's fractured editing, the film's haunting melancholy, they all merged into one timeless vision. It took decades, but The Man Who Fell to Earth became a symbol of art ahead of its time. Proof that sometimes you have to crash land to make history.
5. Local Hero, 1983. On paper, Local Hero seemed too small to matter. A gentle comedy about an American oil executive sent to buy a tiny Scottish village. No big names, no explosions, just small talk, sea winds, and soul. It performed modestly at the box office. neither flop nor success. But for those who watched, it lingered. Director Bill Forsyth captured something Britain rarely celebrates: quiet wonder. Mark Knopfler's score hummed with warmth. The villagers, played by real locals, felt alive, and the film's message, that money can never buy belonging, hit deeper than anyone expected. Over the years, Local Hero became essential viewing, a comfort film for dreamers, a cinematic postcard from a gentler world. Once too quiet for theaters, now whispered about as one of the greatest British films ever made. 6. Brazil, 1985. When Brazil was released, audiences didn't know what to make of it. A nightmarish bureaucratic dystopia, absurd, hilarious, and terrifying, directed by Monty Python's own Terry Gilliam. It told the story of Sam Lowry, a low-level office worker lost in a world where paperwork kills faster than bullets. Visually, it was astonishing, baroque, chaotic, overwhelming, but to studio executives, it was a mess. They hated it so much they tried to cut 40 minutes out and rebrand it as a love story with a happy ending. Gilliam refused. He fought Universal Pictures in one of cinema's most famous creative wars, even taking out a full-page ad asking, "When will you release my film, Mercedes Scheinberg?" At the UK box office, it barely broke even, but time vindicated it. Today, Brazil is seen as a prophetic masterpiece, predicting government surveillance, corporate absurdity, and the madness of modern life with eerie precision. A film too dark for its decade, and too honest to stay buried. 7. Performance, 1970. Few films in history have been as misunderstood as Performance. Directed by Nicholas Roeg and Donald Cammell, and starring Mick Jagger, it fused gangster grit with psychedelic surrealism. It wasn't just ahead of its time. It was on another planet entirely. When Warner Brothers first screened it, executives were horrified. They delayed the release for 2 years, demanded edits, and finally dumped it in a limited run. Critics called it incoherent. Audiences walked out. But the artist stayed. It became a sacred text for filmmakers like Scorsese and Coppola, who saw in it something that mainstream cinema had never dared before: a merging of violence, sexuality, and identity that was pure 1970s rebellion. Its soundtrack pulsed with rebellion, its visuals burned with dream logic, and its message, that art and crime share the same soul, became legendary. From failure to foundation, Performance shaped everything from Trainspotting to Fight Club. 9. Children of Men, 2006. When Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men hit cinemas, it seemed destined for success. Clive Owen, Julianne Moore, Michael Caine, a stellar cast. A gripping dystopian story about a world without children. But the timing was wrong. Audiences weren't ready for its bleak realism or its political undertones. It made just $70 million on a $76 million budget, a certified box office disappointment. Yet as the years passed, the world started to look more and more like Children of Men. Its long, unbroken takes became a film school legend. Its themes, immigration, infertility, social collapse, grew more prophetic every year. What once felt too heavy now feels necessary. Filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan cite it as one of the most important films of the 21st century. A commercial failure turned cultural mirror, reminding us that the future doesn't always come with a profit. 10. Blade Runner, a 1982 UK co-production. Yes, it's an American film, but Blade Runner was built on British craftsmanship, shot at Pinewood Studios, crafted by UK artists and technicians, and influenced deeply by British noir and design sensibilities. When it debuted, it was slaughtered. Critics called it boring, slow, confusing. Audiences didn't care for its philosophy or its rain-soaked melancholy. It earned only $30 million against a $28 million budget. But over time, the world caught up to it. The film's questions about identity, memory, and humanity became the very language of modern sci-fi. From flop to cornerstone, Blade Runner didn't just recover, it redefined an entire genre. Its influence can be felt in everything from Ghost in the Shell to Cyberpunk 2077. It was never meant to please the moment. It was made for eternity. So many of Britain's greatest films began as failures. They were too weird, too bold, too emotional, too British perhaps, in their refusal to fit the mold. But that's what makes them timeless. Because true art doesn't seek approval, it seeks truth. Every one of these films lost at the box office, but won the war against time. They remind us that cinema is not about money, it's about memory. About the stories that outlast our mistakes and the visions that survive rejection. In the end, it's not the hits that define us, it's the courage to keep creating after failure. Because somewhere out there, a new filmmaker is sitting in the dark, watching these once forgotten flops, and realizing that failure isn't the end, it's the beginning. So keep watching, keep dreaming, and keep believing in the power of the underdog, because the next great British classic might just be the one that bombs tomorrow. This is Frame Time, where forgotten films find forever.